Amanda Nunes is once again queen of the UFC bantamweight division. It is Sunday, July 31st, and these are the next day takeaways on the Keyboard Kimura newsletter. And I guess now video station, radio channel, media platform. I don't know what we're going to call it.
Multimedia
conglomerate. I am E. Spencer Kyte. Joining me, as always, from Southeast London, Harry Powell. We are here to discuss all things UFC 277, which took place last night at American Airlines Arena in Dallas, Texas. Closed out, capped off by a dominant performance, but one that also leaves some questions, introduces some things for us to talk about, by Amanda Nunes defeating Juliana Pena. Clean sweep of the scorecards, 50, 45, 44, and 43 on the three cards. Let's start there as we always do. First and foremost, I tweeted it out last night. This once again means that Amanda Nunes has defeated everyone that has ever held gold in the women's bantamweight and women's featherweight divisions in the UFC, which is a staggering accomplishment when you think of it in those terms. This isn't a case. This isn't a division where she bested, a couple of long in the tooth veterans initially to get the title. Everyone she beat, as I wrote on Wednesday for OSDB Sports, she beat everyone within 2 years of them winning that belt or of them having that belt. That's crazy. It's crazy. It shows just how impressive this woman is. Let's start there. Just general thoughts on Amanda Nunes as she is right now, coming off this achievement, maybe her place in, not necessarily the pantheon, because I think we would probably agree that she is the greatest female fighter of all time in terms of accomplishments, but just immediate takeaways of that performance and what it does for her maybe legacy, I guess.
Amanda Nunes is not the same fighter that she once was. That's the first takeaway.
Well, we're just diving right in, folks. We're not pissing about with legacy. We're not any of that. We're just diving right in. Go on, son.
Okay, so I'll touch on the legacy point first, I think. Like, legacy for a fighter comes after your retirement. Legacy for a fighter comes when history looks at you in a favorable or unfavorable manner. Now, people say things like, I want legacy fights. Kamaru Usman has said this. GSP and Khabib have said this before. But really what that means is they want big fights against good opposition that will look good after they've retired. That's what that means. Amanda Nunes, on paper, when she retires, people are going to look and say, she lost to Juliana Pena, and they're not going to dive into why or any of those reasons. They're then going to say, oh, but it's fine because she beat Juliana Pena in a decisive, dominant fashion based on the scorecards and whatever. If they go and look at the fight, and they're going to look at it and they're going to say, well, if we really look at this fight and we compare her to 2 years ago, it doesn't quite look like the same fighter, right? And this is where, from a legacy perspective, when you just say that, you just say she has beaten every single UFC champion to ever hold a belt in the UFC's female divisions, and she's done it within 2 years of them winning the belt. That is a gargantuan, unmatchable achievement. And we should, without doubt, give her all of the plaudits that she deserves for that achievement. However, there is nuance always. If we look
100%.
We look at Ronda, right? The Ronda performance was Ronda getting in who should not have been in that fight. Cyborg was coming to the end of her career. She was still Cyborg, and Cyborg is still coming to the end of her career. But if you look at Cyborg in that performance. Even Cyborg wasn't quite Cyborg in there. Nunes was 100% Nunes, but Cyborg was maybe 70% Cyborg, right? And again, I'm not taking anything away from the performance of Nunes in that fight, because a lot of the reason why Cyborg was not Cyborg was because of things that Amanda Nunes was doing in those 98 seconds or however long that matchup was. The Miesha Tate one, really impressive, because Miesha was Miesha and Nunes was Nunes, and Nunes absolutely murked Miesha Tate, right? That first Pena fight, go and listen to the one-man booth. Go and ask me on Twitter and I'll tell you. That was not a technical failing in so much as it was a mental failing. You and I postured last night when we were watching the second fight. How much of this is because Amanda Nunes is now a mother? How much of this is because she's waking up on the silk sheets and there was the fallout with ATT and she's comfortable in a really loving, secure relationship with Nina, and she has people around her that care about her, and she doesn't have to wake up in the favela anymore. She doesn't have to wake up with struggle and hardship. How much of that is privy to the way that Amanda Nunes conducts herself now? And the final thing I'll say before I pass it back is, go and watch the Amanda Nunes who fought Miesha Tate, who fought Ronda Rousey, who fought Chris Cyborg. She lived up to the moniker. She was anthropomorphizing who her moniker was, the Lioness, right? She went out there, she hunted, and she killed. She's got headphones on at the weigh-ins. She walks to the cage with headphones on. She's smiling and waving at Pena. She wants to touch gloves. She wants to give big smiles. There's hugs in the 5th round. Go and find me a lioness in the wild that hugs her prey, unless it's dead. Amanda Nunes is not the same fighter.
So I will get to even more of why, and we said it last night watching the fight. In the moment, this isn't the same fighter. Here's why, and we will get to those. I do take your point about legacy. I do think part of what has contributed to Amanda Nunes downshifting a little, and it's only a little. I don't think this is a great big fall off. I think it's only a little. I do think there is something to, I've done everything. Like there's literally nothing for her. She has beaten the best names that she could possibly have faced. She's beaten some others as well, and went in there the first time with Juliana Pena thinking, I can get through this despite illness, injury, gym troubles, because I am the greatest. And it backfired. It just absolutely backfired. And when things started going sideways, she looked for the exit ramp and said, not today. It's clearly not my night. We'll regroup and I'll deal with all the stuff, and then I'll come back and beat her. And I think we saw that last night was, okay, I'm, if not 100%, I'm as close to it as I need to be to beat you. And I'm going to make it really clear that I'm orders of magnitude better than you at the fighting. Because we saw it, right? From the early decision to fight southpaw, which was a good adjustment based on what happened last fight. It also seemed to confuse Juliana Pena a little bit, to the second round with the 3 knockdowns or 4 knockdowns or whatever it was, to then using the last 3 rounds to wrestle, get into some weird spots, but also maul and bust her up and beat her up. Which brings us to this is not the same Amanda Nunes. Because if this were the Amanda Nunes that fought Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm, Chris Cyborg, Juliana Pena doesn't survive the second round. Juliana Pena probably actually doesn't get out of the first round because Amanda Nunes is far more aggressive. But as I think everyone, or I hope everyone noticed, you and I certainly noticed, there was a little bit of hesitancy to her in that first and second round of, I know what's happened with this girl before, and she's not going to go away easy And then when Pena is popping right back up from getting dropped, there's that little bit of, uh-oh, what's happening here? And the old Amanda Nunes wouldn't have had any moments of, uh-oh, what's happening here? She'd have been like, great, you're back on the feet. Well, here's another. And here's one more. Oh, you want to keep standing? Here's some more, until the referee comes in and goes, she's done. She may still be standing here and looking for more, but we're done. This is done. And I think, to me, that was the big takeaway, was that I don't even think that it's the power is gone. I think it's the killer instinct is gone. I think it's the unabashed, unrelenting self-belief that comes with running through fighters, as she did for the duration of that run until the first fight with Pena. She's dealt now with a little bit of my invincibility, I'm not invincible. And it's combined with all the other things you mentioned, the family, the not chasing greatness anymore because she is the greatest. We've seen a little bit of a downshift, but this downshift is still pretty damn good.
I don't know if I can agree with that. And the reason why I'll say that is because we saw her downshifting. Okay, let me change this point slightly. We won't know to what degree she's downshifted until we see her again. And I know that sounds strange, but I think Juliana Pena is a limited fighter. She's incredibly tough. She's incredibly durable, incredibly gritty. And she was not going anywhere again last night unless the referee stopped her from going anywhere. So we must look at Amanda Nunes' performance in relation to who she was fighting. I said this to you, or you said it to me, whoever, when we were watching last night. And that was, this Amanda Nunes that's standing here in front of us, how does it go if Juliana Pena happens to be Valentina Shevchenko?
Right.
What do we see then? Right?
Right. And I think there's two options for next. And I think they are Ketlen Vieira, who got that win over Holly Holm earlier this year and has been in the mix, and Valentina Shevchenko, which I think is the fight most everyone wants to see. It's the only one that I actually care about, with all due respect to Ketlen Vieira and the meritocracy and things like that. The wrinkle, and the thing I will throw back to you, is we also saw a not the same version of Valentina Shevchenko last time out. So have both of our dominant queens taken a little step back, and where does it measure out in terms of who's stepped back further? How does that change the dynamic of a rivalry right now that has been two close fights? I was at the first one. If it was a 5-round fight, Valentina Shevchenko wins that fight. The second fight, you could still debate it. I haven't gone back and watched it again in a long time with a judging eye, but you could still debate it. And so, to me, that's the one we need to see. That's how we determine where both of these women are at career-wise.
So the reason why I disagree why it's the fight is because if we're saying Amanda Nunes didn't perform in the first Pena fight because she says, look, this Pena woman's got nothing for me. I'm the GOAT. I've got no reason to get up for this. You know, I can go in there with half a leg and say, I'll just blast her out of there. We'll be grand. She's already beaten Valentina twice.
Yeah, but they were different, right? Like
Amanda's head, were they?
I mean, I would think so. And if given the opportunity, I will 100% assure you that I will ask her, because they were closer. This wasn't. So the thing with Juliana Pena, and so I spoke to Amanda on Wednesday and asked her flat out, look, the first fight, is it difficult to get up because Julie's one win removed from getting choked out by Jermaine Durandamy, who you've beaten twice, both rather handily. And she kind of just did the Yeah, that's part of it. Well, Valentina Shevchenko isn't one fight or two fight removed from a loss. She's 8 fights removed from a loss, and it's a very close fight with you, where a lot of people thought you lost. And then before that, it's a very close fight with you, where she was beating the hell out of you in the final round until the bell rang and you were like, sweet, got it. 2 out of 3. I win. So if she's not thinking of it as this is one I can get up for, she needs to change that thinking, because I think the UFC will make this fight. And I know that Valentina Shevchenko will get up for it.
Right. And this is why I think what you actually do is you do Nunes, Caitlin Vieira, and you do Nunes, Caitlin Vieira, because Nunes now needs to kick on and needs to do the restamping in the division to be like, actually, motherfuckers, I'm actually still Amanda Nunes. Because the thing that I have, and this is a question Shawnee and I were talking about on the podcast earlier, was Nunes in this fight fought purely to right the wrongs of the first fight. She didn't fight in a way of being like, actually, I'm still Amanda Nunes. I'm still this full of hungry, confident, blah, blah, blah. And we saw that, right? What I want to see is let's put her in with Caitlin Vieira, who's a new challenge, a fresh challenge, somebody she's never fought before, somebody who has earned her place very legitimately in a title shot. And then let's see. If Amanda goes in and wrecking balls her, grand. Because I would do Valentina Shevchenko versus Taila Santos again. Again, who knows on the timelines and whether that matches up, but I'd do it. And I'd do it because the same reason has Valentina Shevchenko slowed down a touch. Has Valentina Shevchenko started to miss a beat? If she has, we're going to find out. If Valentina Shevchenko goes in and beats the brakes off Taila Santos, then you have the fight.
We also have precedent for that with the clash of heads, the Davison Figueiredo, Joe Benavidez. Yeah, I mean, look, do that as a twin bill in December.
I like the way you think.
Or January, and then the winners just stand there in the center holding up their collection of belts, and they say, cool, I'll see you on International Fight Week, and we'll do it one more time.
Right. And that's the way, right? Because, I'm going to steal the adage from Mr. Sheehan. We want to see the best fight the best when they are the best. Both of these women, in my opinion, still have a lot to prove to us as to where they are right now. Big question marks over Valentina Shevchenko's head. And actually, just as big, if not bigger question marks over Amanda Nunes' head after the performance last night. So let's see them go in. Either Shevchenko goes and does the blueprint, restamps her blueprint and footprint against Taila Santos. And we see Amanda Nunes go in a fresh matchup and see where she is. Because my assumption, the way that I read the fight, and Shawnee had a different opinion, and I'd be interested in your opinion, I'm leaning all the way into I just think she's a mom now. I think she's a mom, and I think that the role with which she plays with her daughter has softened the killer instinct that she once had. Juliana Pena, on the flip side, has gone the other way. Always tough and gritty and durable, but I think is more tough and gritty and durable, especially when her daughter is stood behind her at weigh-ins doing the stance, which, by the way, is probably the best photo in MMA history, right? It is way up there. Not only because when they come together, her daughter's just kind of stood there meekly, and then Pena puts her hands up and her daughter's like, oh, let's fucking go. Like, that is just gorgeous in every sense of the word. But I have huge questions over Amanda Nunes right now. And I think the fight is Caitlin Vieira first.
So just to answer your question of sort of my read in terms of what has prompted the change, I guess. The birth of her daughter, 100% has impacted things. It's given her a different focus, right? Everybody reacts and responds to the presence of a child in their life in various different ways. Amanda Nunes has gone from being all in, fully immersed in fighting and training and staying atop the mountaintop to now portions of that are dedicated to Reagan. I talked to Miranda Granger for a story that'll come out this week on UFC.com. She's returning this weekend in Las Vegas for the first time since having her daughter just about a year ago. And she said, look, like they called me in April and said, do you want to fight? And I was going into being pregnant. I thought I was going to Mackenzie Dern it. And 4 months later, I'm back in the cage because I'm a fucking fighter. This is what I do. This is how I define myself. And then I started hanging out with my daughter and I was like, I don't want to go back. I want to be here for these moments. So when they called in April, I said no. And I had to wait till I had that little switch flip. And now I want to be in the gym and we've got life organized and I can be both things to both people and all things to all people. And I'm ready again. I don't know that Amanda Nunes is ever going to be the ferocious lioness we saw before she became a parent. It'll be interesting to see if either of these matchups we've talked about can bring that out of her again.
Do you think they do the Juliana Pena rubber match?
I don't think there's any reason to.
Same.
Not right now. Like somewhere down the line, maybe. Depending how long Amanda sticks around.
I was going to say, how much more line do you think there is? You know?
Yeah, this is the other part. I think there's maybe 3 fights. And so Juliana would need to go out and win 2 big fights in big, impressive fashion to maybe make that case. And I don't know who those fights are because there aren't names like that in the division anymore.
Miesha Tate.
I mean, you'd love to see it, but they're so close, right? That was the reason why Miesha went down to flyweight, allegedly, but is now coming back up to bantamweight because flyweight was, lo and behold, weight cutting at 34 was not great on the old bod. So, but we'll figure it out. We'll see where things go. It was a great performance. Regardless of the questions, it was a great performance. There were mistakes on the ground. You and I had questions throughout. I tweeted out during the fight, like, avoid wrestling at all costs because you're making a whole bunch of mistakes. And Juliana Pena is coming really close to snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. I think that was a little bit of bullheadedness of I want to prove some things you were saying during the broadcast. She's really looking for this. She's really trying to do this, but you're making face. You're doing the like, I'm not sure. I don't know that I would say it was a dominant performance. And so share with the class, Harry.
It was dominant. Don't get me wrong. It was dominant, but a great performance? Nah.
Fair.
What she did, I think the southpaw switch was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now, was that her or was that her camp? It was probably a bit of both, right?
Oh, I would bet you that it's 90% Roger Crawl.
Right. So the reason it was great is because when you're standing orthodox to orthodox, Juliana Pena is able to land with that right hand and then come with the left hand and then land the right hand and the left hand and the right hand and the left hand, the right hand and the left hand. And, we do the things, right?
Right.
The fighting occurs. The reason why southpaw shuts that down is because Amanda is further away. That bladed stance with the southpaw means that she's further away from Juliana, and Juliana has to overreach on that right hand to get it to land. So when Juliana was attempting to throw, the first right hand would miss, which Juliana has no problem with because really it's the second set of right and lefts that she wants to land. As the left hook comes, Amanda sees it from a mile away and is landing the overhand right counter. That's what dropped her all 4 times.
Right.
5 times, whatever it was. So that was a wonderful adjustment. Wonderful. But like you said, the Amanda Nunes of a couple of years ago swarms Juliana Pena.
Right.
Cyborg, when she dropped Cyborg, she was on top of Cyborg, being like, go on, get up. I dare you. I fucking dare you. Go on, do it.
Right.
I'm going to help you up with this uppercut.
Right.
She lifts Cyborg back up with an uppercut and then drops her again with an overhand right. Pena goes down and Nunes is stepping backwards and is saying, okay, let's not engage here. And I don't know why that is. I don't know what breeds that hesitancy, right? But there are moments in that fight, and this is one of the big questions I have, is Nunes landed a good couple of punches. And you see she starts to grit her teeth, and you see that she starts to tense and clench like she's going to go and she's going to swarm. And Nina Nunes is in the corner screaming for calm. Big hand movements, big hand gestures asking for calm, bracing for calm, deploring Amanda Nunes from entering into the pocket and getting into those exchanges. And like, I can see why, because it was those exchanges that deterred Amanda Nunes and dropped her into the avalanche, dropped her into Dante's Inferno of madness in the last fight. And look, if you can force your opponent to step in, you can counter them and drop them at will, do that. That's smart fighting. But then you have to punish them. We might talk about this now, but there was conversation online about whether the third round was a 10-8 because of the 3 times that she dropped her, or the second round was a 10-8. I can't remember. But I talked to Shawnee on the podcast. You said the same, and Scott Fontana said the same, that dropping somebody is fine. But the effect of the shot comes 5 or 10 seconds later when you're on top of them, landing your elbows, landing your ground and pound, and stamping that mark. When Amanda Nunes landed her shots that dropped Juliana Pena, because there was no follow-up, Pena just popped back up and looked as if it was nothing, right? And that diminishes in the judge's eyes, I suspect, the effectiveness of that striking. Yes, she dropped Juliana Pena. Yes, she took her away from her feet, but Pena just popped back up and was like, that's okay. We'll continue doing the fighting. No problem.
Yeah, the thing we talked about last night as we're watching the fight, right, is you look at those knockdowns and the impact of those blows and the reaction Juliana Pena has to those blows compared to, say, the Ronda Rousey fight, where Ronda gets hit the first time and is instantly on roller skates, and the rest of the time is trying to get the equilibrium back, is trying to shake out the cobwebs, and is just even more akimbo than normal. Juliana Pena gets dropped. They're clean shots. They're great shots as she's rushing forward, as you said, stepping off, hitting right hands. But Pena just pops right back up. And so to me, I thought the third round was closer to a 10-8 than a second round, because yes, the shots are there and the knockdowns, but this isn't boxing. This isn't you get dropped in boxing once and it's a 10-8, you get dropped more than once and we're doing a whole bunch. There's no 3 knockdown rule, any of those things. The third round, she gets her to the ground and starts throwing some of those elbows and splitting her up and keeps her on the canvas for 3 or 4 minutes and is dominating closer for me to those 3Ds that judges look for of dominance, duration, and damage. And so that for me is why I separate it. You mentioned Shawnee felt that way. You mentioned Scott Fontana. Those are the 2 guys I look to. If my scorecards are similar to theirs, there are also some judges I look to. If they're similar to theirs, I feel quite comfortable in my assessment of things. And so if those fellas feel that way, I do as well.
Damn right. And I just want to touch on that grappling before we maybe move on is we knew going in that Pena's takedown defense is pretty poor. Going into that fight, it was a 22% takedown defense record. That's not great, right? It's not great, especially when some of your best work as Juliana Pena happens when you're on top, right? So, unless you're doing really, really well at sweeping from the bottom, dominating top positions, and doing all of the things, which Juliana Pena does not, then having a really strong takedown defense is going to be a real asset to your game, and Pena doesn't have that. Now, when Nunes was taking Pena down, at least in the first couple of takedowns, they were regular, clean trips, clean takedowns, good mat returns. However, and this is where the decision-making really starts to grate on me, is you're getting the takedowns with ease. Perfect. No problem. In that third round, you take her down, you bust her up, her face is leaking. We got big problems if you're Juliana Pena. 3 or 4 or maybe 5 elbows landed near the end of that round, and they were vicious, hard, cutting elbows. Great stuff. However, Pena's still active in her guard. She's still doing things. She's still using the she's still using the triangle setup guard that she throws. And again, to explain that one, she was trying to close a triangle on her left-hand side, actually closing the triangle on her right-hand side, but using the left leg as a choking leg. So she would drape the left leg across the back of the shoulders, as you'd expect for a triangle. And instead of trying to search to lock up the triangle, she was using the right knee in front of the shoulder, and she was then closing her knee to the bottom of her heel to the best of her ability. Obviously, it's hard to do that in motion, but that's what it would look like if you were drilling it. From there, she's created some nice frames. She's using the leg as a way to break the posture, and she's using the right knee on the shoulder as a way to keep Amanda Nunes away from big, significant elbows. There will be hammer fists, and there may be some side shots and whatever, but it also allows Pena to start elbowing and to start landing her own hammer fist and to start looking for offensive movements herself. Nunes felt that in the first round, in the first fight. I have absolutely no understanding whatsoever as to why Amanda Nunes just didn't do a bit of the jiu-jitsu and just pass the guard. Because we saw then in the preceding rounds that when she did pass the guard and she got to side control, she was ultra dominant. And there was a moment there, she's in side control and she sits herself back into half guard. Now, if you're Khabib, that's great. But let me tell you why it's great. Because Khabib's doing it against the fucking fence, right? In open space, half guard allows an opponent to get a frame on your hips. Any frame on your hips means there will be an ability at some point, unless you're dominating upper body frames, it is absolutely possible to frame on the hips and either get back to a closed guard or put both feet on the hips, square yourself up, push somebody away, and get up. If you're going to play half guard, please play it against the fence, because the person's ability to get up is far, far, far more limited. And as they are getting up, you have far more options to lean your head overhead, get Dagestani handcuffs, land shots, do the whole Khabib rhetoric, right? So the sitting back into half guard from side control made no fucking sense to me whatsoever. She was so dominant in that side control position, landing elbows, landing shots, looking for crucifixes, just causing Juliana Pena absolute fits. And then we go back to close guard, and we go back to close guard again, and we go back to close guard again. I don't know.
Yeah, it was perplexing. There were too many instances where Juliana Pena, for being down as much as she was close to finishing things. And if you don't think some of those attempts were close, you weren't paying attention. Because Amanda Nunes, if they're not close, she doesn't actively work to defend them as swiftly as she did. But she still gets the victory. She gets the title back. We've talked about what may come next. That is the main event. And now we go to the co-main event, which, let me tell you, there you go. Brandon Moreno becomes the interim champion, gets a piece of gold back with a third round technical knockout victory over Kai Kara-France. The finishing sequence, the finishing exchange, the real telling blow is a left kick to the body that is just perfect. It instantly folds Kai over. He collapses to the ground, coffin nails, referee celebration. It is a kick that Sean Madden, when I spoke to him for the Coach Conversations piece on UFC.com heading into the week, mentioned being a big factor. So shout out to Sean for that analysis and identifying that. This was Brendan Moreno, to me, the this was the best version of Brandon Moreno in that we saw the full elements of Brandon Moreno in this, in that he's fine in the technical in the first couple rounds where we're just finding our range and we're each taking our turn and we're landing our shots and things are going fine. And then when it starts to get messy a little bit in the third and Kai Kara-France starts having some success, he says, oh, okay, I'm bleeding and now we're going to do the fist fight thing. Great. And then we get the finish. He's a hell of a fighter. I know you loved the finish. I know you loved the fight in general. So what were your thoughts? What are your takeaways from that effort from Brandon Moreno on Saturday night?
So I actually think both fighters performed really, really well.
100% agree.
I think that we spoke in the preview show that this was Kai Kara-France's first 5-round fight since 2015. And I think he went into this fight with a 5-round mentality. He tried to chop the leg of Moreno. He tried to work himself into the fight. I think the leg kicks that he was landing was definitely damaging the leg of Moreno, both from a visible standpoint, The first leg kick that landed was also a low shot, right? It was a low blow, fine. But as soon as Moreno stepped away, there was a nice big red line on that leg. And those kicks were very accurate from Kai Kara-France. He was nailing that same spot just above the knee every time. And Moreno certainly had to deal with them. He dealt with them with the hip pulls. He dealt with them by shortening his stance just a touch. But we did see the effect of them in his movement. The first round, we see the herky-jerky, awkward, hands up, face moving, awkward shapes. It's like he's taken a few pills at a rave and he's then getting into a fist fight with your man. Like, hella effective. But those leg kicks diminished some of that movement. And I think that was the game plan. The game plan was he's very, very, very awkward from a stylistic perspective. Let's chop at the leg. Let's cut the wood down a little. Let's get him to slow down a little bit. And then our footwork patterns are sitting into our shots, our heavier shots, our straighter shots. We're going to get to him. Let's make sure that we stop the grappling. Let's make sure we stop the scrambling. And let's make sure we just keep cutting at that leg. If we can get into the pocket, let's land big shots and let's keep ourselves safe. That was grand. But Kai Kara-France had a game plan for Brandon Moreno. Brandon Moreno came in and just said, I'm going to fight like Brandon Moreno, and you've got nothing. That, I think, is that we've spoken about this before, and Max Holloway spoke about this too. It's fine being a ranked fighter. Congratulations. But the skill gap, the mentality gap, and the confidence gap between the guys at the absolute precipice of divisions and the guys one place below is gargantuan. Absolutely gargantuan. Because as you said, Brandon Moreno's doing the technical point fighting, touch gloves at the start. Everything's great. I'll give you a handshake at the end of the first round. I'll give you a handshake at the end of the second. The third one, the sweep kick was gorgeous. The elbow lands and Brandon's like, you've cut me now.
Right. Now you've turned this into we have to fight for real.
Right. Now we're not doing the point fighting thing.
Right.
Now I'm a Mexican that wants to get into a brawl and you're fucked. And he was.
You mentioned that gap and we've referenced Max Holloway's conversation with Luke Thomas where he really articulated what you're talking about. And I do recommend everybody go check that out. You can find it on Luke's Twitter feed and probably his YouTube as well. Great conversation, Max, breaking down sort of the levels of things and the difference it takes to be, top 3, top 5, a champion, a defending champion, a tenured champion. I do think that there's the potential for this to be a growth moment for Kai Kara-France. This is a learning tool, right? Now, I don't know necessarily that he can get back to another championship opportunity. The division is is getting some names. There's some people starting to queue up. We'll get to one of them shortly. We also will probably have the fourth fight and resolve this rivalry at some point between Brandon Moreno and Deiveson Figueiredo. But this, to me, I think you're right, came out thinking about it as, I need to manage myself. I need to get to the fifth. I have 25 minutes to work. And Brandon Moreno, as you said, was like, cool, I'm going to fight for as long as they let me keep fighting, I'm going to do the fighting. And we'll start with it being clean and precise and nice and lovely. But as soon as it turns into not clean and precise and nice and lovely, I'm actually even better. Have at it, boys. Let's go. It's a great performance. It reaffirmed to me. I had some questions going in. Shawnee did on the podcast as well when we did the preview show. What is Brendan's mind state in terms of, not facing Deiveson Figueiredo, not getting this rivalry resolved? He switched camps after that loss, moved to Missouri. We talked beforehand of, that's a big thing. And James Krause, for as good as he has been and as good as that gym has been in terms of getting people to the UFC, the track record of success in the UFC just isn't there yet. And that's not a knock on Krause or the fighters. It's just a length of time thing. They have some guys that have had some success, others that haven't. It's too small a sample size to really dictate one way or the other. But they had success on Saturday night. That tandem had a lot of success on Saturday night. And Brandon Moreno looked great. And I cannot wait for this fourth fight between he and Deiveson Figueiredo. And good Lord, I hope they don't wait to do it in Brazil somewhere, because that would mean January, February, March. And I don't want to wait that long. I would like it in December if we could arrange that. Las Vegas, December. Why? Come on, let's go.
Do it in Miami, right? So, just
something.
Yeah.
Does anything from Saturday that Brandon Moreno delivered and showed impact, change your outlook on a fourth fight with Deiveson Figueiredo? Give you new questions for that fourth fight with Deiveson Figueiredo? Or is that just one of those rivalries that these two are pretty close and it's going to be another close fight?
I have no idea, because Figueiredo is one of those guys that you just kind of don't know who's going to turn up. If Figueiredo turns up that absolutely shafted Alex Perez, yeah, it's a close fight, boys. It's a close fight. But Deiveson Figueiredo also, and this is a brutal comparison, so please allow me, but he has the air of a Rafael Alves.
We saw him kind of shit the bed in the second fight.
Right.
Turned up and was just like, well, here's the belt. It's your turn. Good luck to you.
Right. And it's like everything is big power. Everything is big athleticism. Everything is maximum tension. Everything is maximum squeeze. And when Brandon is still there, just like Drew Dober was still there, it's like, fuck. I don't have as much gas as I had 2 rounds ago. And this motherfucker's not even breathing heavy. What do we do now? Right. So
this fella's bleeding. I've cut him up. I've hit him with my best shots. And he's still smiling at me doing the hand thing. And he won't go away.
So I think the thing that I was impressed with Brandon Moreno is also potentially a downfall. The thing that impressed me was he was doing the technical fighting really, really well. And he didn't address the leg kick as much as I would like for him to have addressed the leg kick. He got punished with it a number of times, but I also understand that that's a weakness of the way that he fights. It's a weakness of his stance. He stands super long, and you're always going to be open for leg kicks when you stand that long. The hip pull was a really nice addition. But the thing is that he does and did fight with his ego, right? the moment that it switched, the moment that the blood came, like he was doing okay, I can do the close guard thing. We could be here for a while. The moment that elbow landed, he was like, fuck. Okay. Now I'm going to get up and now I'm going to do the fucking fighting.
Right.
And whilst against Kaikara France, that worked really, really well, that might not work so well against Davison Figueiredo because Kaikara France has big power, but Davison Figueiredo has Mack truck power. So that to me is a big question in the next fight. I feel like I'm absolutely butchering this, by the way, but I feel as like Brandon Moreno has gone up a level.
Yes.
Brandon Moreno has come into his own again. Brandon Moreno walked into that Kaikara France saying, just so you know, I've been at the precipice. I know what it feels like to be successful against the guy that nobody wants to fight in this division. I've been in there for many minutes. I know what works. I know what doesn't work. I am confident in myself to know that on any given night, if I perform, I take home that gold shiny belt and he goes back to Brazil and carries on being a hairdresser. You don't know that. And I'm going to show you that you don't know that. That, I think, is an absolutely massively intangible, but massive, massive point to the next fight. Davison Figueiredo hasn't fought a non-title fight in a minute, you know?
I do. I'm already looking forward to the one-man booth for that fourth fight because you've got 3 fights to go back over in your meticulous nature. Cannot wait for it. Those are the title fights. Those are the big top of the marquee faces on the poster fights from Saturday. We'll get through the rest of these in much quicker fashion. Sergei Pavlovich defeats Derrick Lewis, first round TKO stoppage. Listen, I don't want to get into who comes next and where's Derrick Lewis go and all of that stuff. Thoughts on the stoppage itself?
Yeah, so Shawnee and I had a conversation about this, and he's kind of reverted the way that I think about it. Live, I said that's an early stoppage. And then I looked at it on the replay, and you and I had a conversation, and I kind of agreed with what you were saying, that finding the Goldilocks zone is always, always difficult, and you always want to err on the side of fighter safety and whatever. But I went back and watched that fight this morning with fresh eyes, and I still think it's a little bit early. The reason why I think it's a little bit early is as Derrick drops, his hands hit the mat, and he's activating his hands to push himself back up. Now, I am not saying that on the way back up, he doesn't take a gargantuan uppercut and gets pushed back over his knees and he's all over the place or whatever. But I do feel like we need to see that. You know, if he's on his way back up, he's still cerebrally there. It doesn't look good when your head hits the mat, but to me, watching it back, and I said this on the podcast, it felt like Dan had made his decision as he was going down, rather than watching, observing, telling Derrick that he needed to defend himself and that he needed to move, otherwise this fight was done. He didn't. As Derrick hit the mat, Dan was like, I've already decided this is over. And that to me is a problem. Now, I understand that, and I agree with you in your sentiment that it's always important to protect the fighter. But I also think you must read the situation. And if you read the situation and you cost Derrick Lewis one coffin nail, it's not great, sure. And I'm not saying I think Derrick Lewis gets back up and blams Pavlovich into row Z. But I do think that there's always a chance. This is MMA. Now, Shawnee said you have to know the fighter. I don't agree with that. And I don't agree with that because you can't make precedents for certain fighters that you can't follow for others, because that's not rule following, right? But I do think you have to know the situation and you have to allow the situation to run its course. If Derrick Lewis was able to push himself back to a 4-point, look up and dodge the shots from a 4-point and get himself back up and do the fighting again, who knows what happens? Because then you can say, as a media member, this is Derrick Lewis. He could have finished that fight at any moment. Now, you know, from a logical perspective, he was hurt, he was rocked. Is there a chance that Pavlovich lands a big shot as he gets up and puts him back down? Yeah, almost certainly that's what happens. but I think you have to let the fight play out a little longer.
So your point about about Mergliata seeming to have made his decision when the shot that drops Derek into the face plant lands is the correct one to me. Is the one that I have gotten to subsequent to watching it last night. I still listen. This isn't me backtracking on anything I said last night. I still think in general, MMA Twitter, the MMA populace wants everything to be perfect. If it's early, they riot. If it's late, they riot. Give me the absolute perfect stoppage. But I do think what you said of you see the reaction of when he gets dropped there and then make your call. And if he is coming up, okay, he's still with us here, but I'm close. And if he takes one more, he takes two more, I can get in there and stop this fight. I do not think, as you said, that you make any calls based on, well, it's Derek Lewis or it's a championship fight. I have to give. No, everybody gets the same. Defend yourself intelligently. If you're in harm's way and it's going, this is just the avalanche that we talked about on the preview show. I'm going to save you from the avalanche. It has to be the same for everybody. If it's a hair too early, and I do agree that this is probably a shot or two too early, I will always err on the side of a shot or two too early rather than see those shot or two too late. But it's a reminder again of the tough position. It's why I think we need to give credit where it's due when we get great stoppages and when we have great officials in there doing officiating things expertly, whether it's stopping fights, whether it's addressing fouls, whether it's, assessing fouls, things like that. This was a little bit early. You could see afterwards that Dan Mergliata was kind of having a little bit of the I think I was a little early on it. It's all right, Big Dan. A little early is better than a little late. I'd rather you, get in there before the Kerry Hatley zone kicks in. So it is what it is.
I think just to round that off as well, it's important to have these discussions and it's important to always strive for perfection. It's important also to know that we're never going to reach it, but it's important to have the discussion where you say, yeah, I will always strive on the side of fighter safety and I will always stand for the side of stopping that fight a hair too early. But if we can not stop that fight a hair too early, let's do that, right? Let's do that.
Yeah, the aim is to get it. The aim for everybody is to get it dead on every time. It's to stop it right on the mark every time. What I think we see a lot of, or we see more of, is it stopping beyond that mark more often than we see it stopping before that mark. And oddly to me, and frustratingly to me, the reaction is greater and more vitriolic for the early than it is for the egregiously late. And that's worrisome to me.
I think that makes perfect sense, to be honest. And
I understand why it makes sense, but it pisses me off.
So it doesn't piss me off necessarily. And the only reason why it doesn't is because when people are watching these fights, they're very often watching them because they want one fighter to win or one fighter to lose. So when a fight stops early, it's usually because they're like, oh, but my guy could have.
Right.
Or, oh, my guy was going to.
Part of that last night is 100% that it's Derek Lewis and everybody wants to see Derek Lewis swing and bang.
Right. It's also Derek Lewis in Texas. He hasn't won in Texas. He hasn't performed well in Texas. And he wants to go out and he wants to give. I think something I was thinking this actually as the fight happened is that Derek Lewis does not want to be the guy walking into the Kmart or the Walmart or the Whole Foods or whatever in Texas. And the guy's like, oh, aren't you that guy that got knocked out at, He wanted desperately to give the Texas natives something where he walks into the Walmart and they're like, oh, you're the dude that bashed up the Russian guy, right? And he's like, yeah, I'm that guy. And I think that's a legacy thing over things like Nunes beating up a one-dimensional fighter that she lost to 6 months ago.
Fair. Flyweights. Alexandre Pantoja returns from just about a year off, runs across the cage, says, Alex Perez, I'm not letting you get comfortable. We're going to start fighting. I'm going to climb onto your back, and here's a neck crank. Good night. I want my goddamn title shot. Just, if Brendan Moreno was chef's kiss, this is chef's kiss as well. This is, I was worried and questioning, like, you're coming off a knee. How deflated are you that you were sitting there for the title shot and now it's gone sideways? And the guy that you were going to fight, that you already have 2 wins over, isn't even the champion anymore. And Pantoja was like, yeah, fuck all of that stuff. I'm going to destroy this dude and stamp my place as the number 1 contender whenever it comes, just by running through this dude. Just absolutely beautiful. Adored it. My favorite performance of the month.
Dog. Pantoja's all right, isn't he? I feel so bad for Alex Perez. Dude.
He has not lasted more than 2 minutes combined in his last 2 appearances.
Oh, talk about getting put through a fucking washing machine.
2 years apart.
Oh, brutal. Absolute. Like, you want to be a fucking fighter? You know? Pantoja goes over to him and's like, you know this fighting thing? Fuck that. He just chucked him in a washing machine, set it to fucking absolute max spins, battered him for a bit, went for a bit of grappling, got to a back body lock, and was like, I don't even want to choke you. I don't give a fuck about any of this choking nonsense. My forearm's over your face. I'm going to squeeze really hard, and you're going to fucking tap. Okay? Cool. He spent longer on top of the cage shouting at Dana for a title shot than he did beating the fuck out of Alex Perez.
Right.
The level of disrespect was unbelievable.
Amazing. Let's talk about that finish, because they announce it as a rear naked choke. You and I are on our feed, our stream, watching the fights, yapping with each other as it happens. And both immediately go, yeah, that's not a rear naked choke. It's reductive to just call that a rear naked choke. It wasn't a choke. There wasn't actual choking happening. It wasn't under the chin. It wasn't cutting off airflow or blood flow. It was straight up, maybe it's a jaw crank or a jaw crush of some kind.
Definitely a jaw crush.
Also a neck crank of some kind where I'm going to just keep pulling and turning and your neck doesn't go past a certain point and you're going to be like, yeah, stop doing that, please. It wasn't, here's the choke, we're done. It was, good night. This is going to keep hurting. You can stop now. Tell me when to stop. It was a big brothering. That's what it was. It was a, come here, little brother. Let me try this thing, and you tell me when to stop. And Alex Perez was like, I'm going to need you to stop now.
So, from a technical perspective, the reason why it's not a jaw crank the reason why it's not a rear naked choke is for the reasons that you've already established. The choking arm was not under the chin, and it wasn't cutting off any air supply. Now, there is a choke that is not under the chin, and it's called a mandible strangle. So essentially, it's exactly the same setup as a rear naked choke, but it is over the jaw. The finishing mechanics are slightly different, but you want to get the crook of your elbow over the chin, right? Now, instead of raising your elbow up and drawing it back across the shoulder to cut the arteries off, you're instead squeezing your elbows together and closing your chest in. So what's happening is you're forcing the jaw muscles back and down and through the arteries. So you're cutting off the air supply to the esophagus and you're cutting off the carotid arteries with your own jaw. It's a very, very legitimate choke. It definitely works, but it wasn't that either, right? So, yeah, calling it a rear naked choke it's just silly because
lazy.
It's not that.
It's lazy.
Yes, sure. Lazy.
And to me, it's one of those things where we, whether that's you and me on this program, whether that's media in general, whether that's people with the UFC, the broadcast team, whatever, should work to clarify it, because the best we can expand the lexicon and educate people, it's all for the better. Because when you see a rear naked choke, which you will see probably Tuesday on Contender Series or next Saturday in the Apex or on any other fight program that you're going to watch, it wasn't that. And it wasn't close to that. And so let's just get the terminology right. But if that's the only haggle, if that's the only gripe, not the end of the day. Hell of a performance from Pantoja. I think he should hang out and wait to get next. It may take some time, but that's fine. Train, remain hungry and savagely violent. We love you, Alexandre Pantoja. Main card opener, Magomed Ankalaev goes out and gets a second round TKO win over Anthony Smith, who self-diagnosed as a broken ankle. As the stoppage occurs, sort of at the end of the stoppage, we saw him noticeably limping, going to the corner after round one. This is a tough one because, you know me, I am the chief advocate for 9 straight wins against anybody is not easy. It carries a certain weight. This is now 3 straight former champions. It is a stoppage. But there's going to be that asterisk. There's going to be that Anthony Smith is hurt. There's going to be the Anthony Smith kind of brought Ankalaev into position to finish. You and I said it during the stream. What is Anthony Smith doing pulling guard? Why are you inviting a very large Dagestani man on top of you to a position where he's quite comfortable and quite skilled? And I know you said coming out of it that you think we need to reassess sort of the championship potential or timeline of Ankalaev based on this performance. Please tell us why.
I think what we learned from Ankalaev yesterday is if you allow him to dictate range and rhythm, he's an extremely dangerous man. In the first round, when Smith was going shot for shot, 1 to 2 punch combinations, allowing Ankalaev to reset, allowing Ankalaev to land the low kicks, to, do the grappling things, do the anti-grappling things, he looked untouchable, right? I went back and I watched the fight again this morning just to make sure that I wasn't watching it with, 6 a.m. eyes. And it was actually way more dominant in the first round than I remember and way less dominant in the second round than I remember. I think the ankle injury came from an accumulation of things. I think it came from Smith throwing a kick and Ankalaev checked it beautifully. But then there was a weird moment where Smith throws a right hand, he overreaches, Ankalaev ducks down for a takedown, and as Smith is squaring up, he rolls over the left ankle in a weird way as he's pivoting. So I think maybe that has something to do with it. And then he like pulls guard himself, right? He like rocks back and his hips go up, and that's where it's sort of the last sort of 15 to 20 seconds of round one. That's where we see Ankalaev land a couple of leg kicks. He does catch the same ankle in some of those leg kicks, so maybe it's an accumulation. But either way, the reaction from Smith was strange. Smith then came out in the second round, and I think because he was aware that he was carrying a relatively significant injury at that point, he was like, well, I'm going to up the pace for 15 to 20 seconds, see what I can get done. If I have success, I'll sit in. If not, we'll see what happens. And he touched Ankalaev a number of times. He forced Ankalaev to stand up bolt straight with his chin up a little bit, and the footwork was a bit off, and he was on his heels a few times, and this wasn't really where I was expecting it to go. Now, Ankalaev threw in the pocket and connected to Smith just as well. But what I said to you on comms was like, if that was Jamahal Hill, or if that was Glover Teixeira, or if that was Yuri Prochazka, we could be looking at a very different thing now. The pulling of half guard, the pulling of butterflies, especially when you've supposedly got a broken ankle, is wild to me. But these things happen in MMA, I guess. Ankalaev can only take the finish that's available to him, and he took it smartly, right? He allowed Smith to turn, and then he just beat fuck out of him until the ref came in. But the cliff drop from Smith was very, very strange. The reason why I call for a slowing of the roll against Ankalaev is that lack of ability to adapt in the moment and the lack of ability to read the situation changing and then change his game plan on the fly. That change in rhythm, change in pace, change in range, change in direction is something that happens all the time in the highest of the high-level fights. And if he's not prepared for it, or if he didn't even think it was a possibility, that's a problem.
Yeah, and they're the things that often differentiate the champion from the challenger, the elite from the exceptionally good. I do think Smith is probably, and look, this is me trying to get inside the head of Anthony Smith in the midst of a fight where he's got a bum ankle. I think he's probably thinking, I've got pretty good jiu-jitsu. I can maybe sweep this guy, get into top position, or he falls into something and I can get on a choke or I can get on a Kimura sweep, something. And then it's just like, Ankalaev's like, great, perfect, cool. This is where I'd like to be anyways. And you're compromised. We're going to get out of here. I do think the state of the light heavyweight division right now creates an opportunity for Ankalaev to have to fight probably twice more before he would get a title shot. I think we're going to do a rematch between Prochazka and Teixeira, depending on how Jamal Hill and Thiago Santos goes on Saturday. We have some options. Jan Blachowicz, maybe Hill, maybe we'll see who else. But I do think I still like the potential. I still think the upside is there, but I do want to see some of those changes and some of those adjustments you're mentioning.
Let me see Volkan Ozdemir.
He's already beaten Volkan Ozdemir.
I was going to say, has he beaten Volkan
He beat Volkan Ozdemir in Abu Dhabi last year on my birthday.
Okay, then don't do that fight. Maybe it is Jamal Hill.
Jamal Hill's interesting. I think Jan Blachowicz obviously is interesting as a former champion. I think those are the two. If Hill gets through Thiago Santos, I think that's reasonable. But I also think that if he gets through Thiago Santos the same way he's come through Jimmy Crute and Johnny Walker, Jamal Hill goes forward a step and Magomed Ankalaev hangs out where he is and gets to fight Jan Blachowicz.
Yeah.
It's just our matchmaking ideas, Sean Shelby McMaynard. Feel free to take them if you'd like them. We're going to just buzz through. I'm going to buzz through the results here for the prelims and then turn it to you to discuss whichever ones you want to discuss. We'll get into a couple. We don't have time limits here. These are our takeaways. It is our show. We will talk for as long as we like, but we'll just run through them. Alex Morono gets a unanimous decision win over Matt Semmelsberger. Drew Dober gets a third-round knockout win by punch to the body over the aforementioned Rafael Alves. Hamdi Abdelwahab defeats Dontel Mays by split decision in a heavyweight fight. Drakkar Klose outworks Rafa Garcia at lightweight. Early prelims, Michael Morales, third-round TKO over Adam Fugit. Jocelyn Edwards defeats Jian Kim by split decision at a catchweight of 137.5. Nick Negumereanu gets a second-round TKO over Ihor Pretoria. And in the opener, Orion Kosi defeats Mike Blood Diamond Mathena by unanimous decision. Which of those would you like to start upon, good sir?
First fight was horrendous, so we'll move past that really quickly. Jocelyn Edwards, Jian Kim was an interesting fight as much as it was frustrating. Jocelyn Edwards has a really nice, really dexterous, really varied kicking game, really long legs, and uses them really, really well. But she's going to get found out very, very quickly with that style against some ladies who are either a little bit more dominant in the grappling perspective or are able to time those kicks and use those kicks to run her to the mat or counter her or whatever the things are. I was so impressed with Drew Dober. So impressed. If it wasn't for Alexandre Pantoja, Drew Dober is the spotlight. But Drew Dober proved that athleticism doesn't, solely athleticism doesn't win you fights. Now, Drew Dober himself is obviously a very, very good athlete. You and I mentioned that if we could have one thing for Christmas, it would be Drew Dober's physique for a couple of weeks, just so we could get 15 years worth of Instagram pictures out of it. But
all the glamour shots, all the calendars.
Yeah, and the CD shots. Just get everything. It's fine. Everything is on the table. I felt as though Dober just showed Rafael Alves that better footwork, better countering, and more intelligent fighting wins you fights, rather than just being a pure athlete. Rafael Alves was too happy to throw everything into every single shot, to do backflips in the cage, to do backflips in the warm-up area. And yeah, he got loads of plaudits for doing some really nice head movements when he was under fire against the cage. But you shouldn't be under fire against the cage in the fucking first place, right? And no amount of athleticism, pure athleticism, is going to get you away from there when you're fighting just as good of an athlete. So Dober showed me yet again just how important he is to this division, and just how important it is to have a gatekeeper like him who, sure, we're probably never going to see Drew Dober in a title shot unless it's something mad like he's on an undercard, he makes championship weight, he's an alternate, and then he's in. That could absolutely happen. He is that kind of fighter. The UFC would lean on him for that kind of thing. Exciting fighter, makes weight, company man, looks beautiful, fits all the boxes, right? But pure fighting ability, we've seen when he gets to the elite level, he just doesn't quite have enough. And that's absolutely fine. His ability to be in there with all the prospects that are going to come through, they're going to get the Drew Dober test. And if they blow him out of the water, boy, oh boy, are we on for the races. If they have a close fight and he loses, we know that fight has got potential, but maybe some building to do. If Drew Dober beats you, we know that there's a lot more of work for you to do for you to get anywhere near that elite division. For that reason, we must give Drew Dober all of the credit that he deserves. We must give Drew Dober all of the plaudit and respect that he deserves, and we should cherish Drew Dober. He said in his post-fight interview to Joe Rogan, fuck Joe Rogan, by the way, he said in his post-interview with Joe Rogan, I turn down fights that I think are going to be boring. Respect that man.
I mean, you just summed up exactly what I wrote in 10 Things We Learned about Drew Dober. Give the man his flowers now while he's here. Let's talk about him in these terms. It's a thing you and I do quite regularly, because I think you and I both have exactly what you said, that appreciation for those guys that fit the Drew Dober category, that fill the Drew Dober role. He is the kind of guy that 10 years after he's retired is going to be lost to the sands of time. We're not going to be sitting here going, hey, remember Drew Dober? But right now, we need to remember Drew Dober. The other part of that, and you're absolutely right, and it's one of the things I adore about this sport. It's one of the reasons I am so invested in long-term about this sport and in watching this sport, is because the pendulum swings, right? There's points where athleticism will carry you over other things. You can have more experience, more technical skills, but I'm just going to out-athlete you. We see that at all levels, in all divisions, in various different forms. But there comes a point, as we saw on Saturday, where you can have all the athleticism, but if you don't know how to apply it, I was going to say applicate it. If you don't know how to apply it, if you don't know how to dole it out with technique, with conscientiousness, great. I'm going to be over here, still a great athlete, let you tire yourself out a little, and I'm going to out-technical you, and I'm going to out-experience you, and I'm going to use all the other things that I have that you don't, to beat you. And we see that all the way up the ranks in every division at all levels. And I just love it so much.
I think the other, to completely switch from that and move into using a lot of pure technique and game plan to beat athleticism, is Alex Morono, Matt Semmelsberger. So you and I had a slight disagreement when we were watching on the fights. And when Morono started, his game plan was lots and lots and lots of volume, and to use head movement and footwork and volume to dissuade the power punching of Semmelsberger. And we were talking about whether that was the right approach, right? We said, is this the right approach? Is Alex Morono baiting the guy a little? Is he going to land up for a big shot?
I'm going to jump in and interrupt you because you're being lovely and nice and kind of evening it out. I said, I think this is a mistake. I would like to see him wrestle more because you're tempting fate with the big power of Matt Semmelsberger. And you said?
I said, don't be fucking stupid. He should be doing exactly what he said.
And then for the next 15 minutes, I proceeded to go, fuck, you were right. Yep, this is brilliant. He's doing a great job. Look at these little shots here. Look at this here. Look at that movement there. Go on, son.
The thing that impressed me about Morono is Semmelsberger. We've talked about this, right? His nickname is Semi. He is a bit like a semi truck, right? He's a big cunt, big meaty bastard, and he's got big power, but not a lot of ability to land it and set it up with pure technique. And against somebody like Morono, who he reminds me of Jan Blachowicz, in that people don't think he's as good of a kickboxer as he actually is, right? Because he looks like, he's got a little bit of belly fat and he's bald and he may not have the tattoos and he doesn't do a lot of the talking and he doesn't do a lot of the big flashy knockouts and stuff. But go and spend 15 minutes with him and try and hit him. You're going to find out it's way harder than you think it is, right? Because his ability to gauge distance, make feints, to cut angles, and to land shots and not be in the pocket for when you're expecting him to be, to then land your counters, is really, really good. And Semmelsberger gave up a couple of things. He gave up the technical advantage to try to apply his athleticism advantage, and he gave up the speed advantage to try to apply the power advantage. And Morono just used both of those things to absolute beautiful, beautiful effect. Bust him up real bad. Kerry flatly wanted to see fucking Semmelsberger literally on the floor dead. I don't know if it was Kerry Flatley or Herb Dean, but essentially they might as well be brothers because they're both stone fucking useless. But there was a moment in that fight where Semmelsberger is covering like both of his eyes, a little bit like Blade Runner. And the goggles do, right? It may not be Blade Runner. I may be talking about my ass, but he has the goggles over his eyes and the things. And Morono is just plumb clinch, slamming knees through the middle. And Semmelsberger's just taking them like, I guess this big gap in the middle that's being exploited isn't working. If I just hold it here longer, it might magically work. It did not work. I think the eye was way too closed. And the doctor was fucking shit, and the referee was fucking shit. You shouldn't have sent that guy out with an eye that was quite clearly closed. But Morono showed that with the right amount of technique against a certain level of athlete, you could put on a great performance.
So somebody on Saturday during the fight, and I can't remember who, I don't want to misattribute it, and I apologize for not remembering who it was, tweeted out that it looked like the captain of the football team against the captain of the debate club, and the kid from debate club was kicking his ass.
Perfect.
Pretty much it. Yeah. Alex Morono, a pretty cerebral guy. To me, very similar in position to a Drew Dober. Has kind of accepted, we said it while we were talking during the fight, kind of accepted that, look, I'm not going to be a top 5 welterweight in the UFC. But I can make a great living right here where I am, doing this thing against these guys. And yeah, every so often I'm going to run into Chaos Williams, or I'm going to get paired off with Anthony Pettis, who are the last 2 guys to beat him. But outside of that, I'm going to win 7 fights. And so going 7-2 or going 6-3 or 8-3 or whatever it may be earns you a pretty good living, earns you a pretty good keep, earns you good recognition, should earn you praise from suckers like us that watch all of these fights and talk about all of these fights. And if it's not, I think people are doing you a disservice, because you showed on Saturday night, and one of your takeaways during that fight as we were talking about it was, this is the ceiling for Matt Semmelsberger. I'm very interested in what he could maybe do, and it's a short window. If there's any room, it's a 2-year, 3-year max window to go and get with a team of coaches and training partners that can work on some of that fundamental, rudimentary stuff that just needs to be cleaned up and corrected because of the things you said of he's a great big cunt and he's got power and those things. Give me 2 years with somebody that is already graduated and elevated people to higher levels in this sport. Maybe, but it may also just be that this is the ceiling and he will continue to bomb on the Jason Witts and Martin Sanos of the world and have good fights with young kids like AJ Fletcher, but isn't going to get past the Alex Morono hurdle.
Damn right. And I think another one we'll talk about for their potential is Michael Morales, right? Now, I think the fight this weekend showed us that we have to slow our roll on Michael Morales too. Shawnee mentioned that he doesn't think that he should be in the UFC right now. And his reasoning, I think, for that is because of his look and because he hits hard, they're going to catapult that dude faster than his progression is going to allow him to catapult. I think I see that, and I don't mind that way of thinking. Allow him to go out, and I mean, you're not going to cut him now. There's no reason to cut him now. But if he was on the regional scene, go win a belt, defend it 3 or 4 times, build yourself in. We've talked previously. He's only 23. He's building into his frame. He's building into who he is as a person. And the takeaway that I had from the fight on Saturday was he has big power, but it feels like he relies on it a little bit too much. The fight told me that he's used to having things go his way a little bit more than it did on Saturday. He's used to being the bully a little bit more. He's used to hitting guys in sparring and they either go away or they detract from him and they allow him a little bit more space. Fugit didn't do that. Fugit was like, fuck lads, I've got a UFC call up on short notice and I know how this works. If I get blasted out of here real quick, I don't get the other 2 fights. But if I come in here and I prove myself and I say, lads, I can do this just as well as he can do this, you get the second go. And the second go will be a little bit more reasonable for you because you took the fight on short notice. So fair play to Fugit. He turned up. He showed his skills. And Morales, for all of the goodness that we see in his game, I would really like him to take a look at his training camp, a look at who he's sparring with and who he's surrounded by, and ask himself, are these the best people to bring out the potential that is quite clearly in me?
He is a guy to me that is at least 4 years away from fighting the best names in this division. Maybe even fighting ranked names in this division. And the challenge, as you said, and as Shawnee said correctly, is that how do you navigate 4 years when you're putting on performances like that, when you have that Contender Series diploma, when they're looking for fresh, new, young stars, and here you are putting together highlights that they can cut together into a lovely sizzle reel of you finishing dudes. I think the trouble with he shouldn't be in the UFC, and I know exactly, and I understand exactly what Sean is talking about. The trouble with it is that I don't think there's the challenge that being on the regional circuit now isn't the same as it was 10 years ago, isn't the same as it was 20 years ago. There are so many promotions that are going to be looking to sign a guy like Michael Morales at this point of his career that one, you're not going to get the chance. You're going to have to do the Paddy Pimblett thing, actually, of say, no, UFC, I'm not ready yet. The Jimmy Manuwa thing. No, guys, I'm not ready yet. I want to stay here, which is a correct decision for both of those men at that time. And I'm sure there have been other people. But you don't always get the callback from the UFC. And are you going to say no to the UFC and Bellator and PFL and Combate and One Championship? And like, at what point do you, as the 23-year-old kid from Ecuador who has moved to Mexico to pursue this dream, do you go, yeah, I don't want to be fighting for $1,000 anymore against these guys that I'm just smashing? Because while I think there are probably one or two competitive fights in LFA or in CFFC or in whatever regional promotion you want to talk about, there's a cap on that. And so this is where, to me, it comes down to Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard looking at things long term and being able to say, he's at 170, he's 23, he's 14-0, but this is where he's at in terms of, it's not so much about the record that he has or even the finishes. It's just diagnose and assess his progression, where he's at now, where he can get to. And we need to slow play this. We need to go incremental steps as opposed to leaps and bounds. Because this isn't a John Jones thing where it's like clear after 2 fights that, yeah, this guy's ready for, he just did that to Stephan Bonner, he's ready for whatever. This is, okay, he got Adam Fugit out of there in the 3rd round, but had some moments in the first 2 where Fugit had some success. So let's go real slow. Let's go the Ian Gary road. Let's go the bit by bit by bit, so that at 25 and 26, he's developing and he's growing and he's progressing. And we haven't hung 3 losses on him that have broken this man's spirit and limited that upside that right now feels really high.
Absolutely. And I think the last fight I'd talk about is Drakkar Klose. I think Drakkar Klose, that fight was a tale of 3 rounds, quite literally. You know, Drakkar came out in the first round, looked really good. Garcia turned the tide in the second, battled back. And then in the third was like, I'm a little bit more tired than I thought I was. And Drakkar's like, yeah, cool, bro. I'm not. Let's go. And won that 3rd round. I think the striking offense was nice from Klose. I was quite shocked at the lack of takedown defense from Drakkar Klose. Garcia, we know, has some of the wrestling and has some of the grappling, but the ease with which Drakkar Klose was taken down was surprising to me. That's something certainly to take away and have a look at. But the versatility in his striking, the footwork, the pressure, all of those things are really, really nice. Really, really nice.
And another one of those guys in that Alex Morono, Drew Dober mold of kind of exists in the second 15 in the lightweight division, has been, pun intended, close to being in the top 15, ran level with Beneil Dariush in that fight, had him on the verge of being out of there, and then not collapsed, but just kind of made some poor decisions, and that's what it is. This fight, to me, look, the return fight earlier in the year against Brandon Jenkins was a get-right fight, was a layup to shake off 2 years of rest because, Jeremy Stephens shoved you and cost you a year of your career. Here you go, beat the hell out of this guy. Welcome back to Drakkar Klose. Saturday was, let's see where those levels are at. Let's see if you're still the guy from before Jeremy Stephens. Okay, you are. Now we can continue to matchmake you the way we have. I think you said it last night as we were talking, a matchup with somebody that he was supposed to fight Diego Ferreira here. And so a fight in that range, something similar to that, feels appropriate, feels like he's 34. If he's going to make a charge, if there's going to be advancement, it's got to be now. There's no need to slow play anything. No. So let's get him in there with one of those guys and see what happens. But this was, as you said, a good win with some veteran sharpness to it.
Yeah.
But also some points that illustrated why he has been a second 15 guy and not a top 15 guy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But overall, I thought the main card was brilliant. Lots and lots of good performances. Obviously, the Lewis fight was a bit weird because of, however it happened. The Ankalaev fight was a little bit strange, at least the ending to it, the ending sequences and whatever. But overall, 2 title fights were bananas. Pantoja looked fantastic. I was impressed with Morono, as we've said, really impressed with Dober. I thought that Negumereanu was pretty good, turned the tide against Pretoria. Overall, pretty solid card.
Yeah, and a card that gave us a lot to look forward to. A card that gave us a bunch of new questions to ask, a bunch of new things to talk about, a bunch of things to kind of squirrel away and wait for the next time these athletes compete, these next matchups. And when they do come, we will be right here talking about them afterwards, talking about them beforehand, talking about them at great detail, because it is what we love to do. It's what we love to share with you guys. This has been the Next Day Takeaways for UFC 277. He is Harry Powell. Go follow him on Twitter at BJJ_Harry Powell. Check out the Severe Spotlight on Monday, which will be on Alexandre Pantoja. Check him out on The Big Show, the flagship program, the Severe MMA podcast with Sean Sheehan. Tomorrow is August 1st, the best time possible to sign up for the Severe MMA Patreon account. It's a coffee. Just sign up for it. You get podcasts every day. They're terrific. The boys cover it from top to bottom. It's great. I am Spencer Kyte, at Spencer Kyte on Twitter. I will be back here tomorrow with a Keyboard Kimura podcast brought to you by the fine folks at One Bone, and all kinds of stuff throughout the rest of the week as we look forward to and work towards Jamal Hill and Thiago Santos, the Ultimate Fighter 30 finale, Vicente Luque and Jeff Neal on Saturday as well, which, you're yawning about tough.
Jeff Neal.
Yeah. But
War Luque. Luque.
Vicente Luque's fighting. I can already tell you, folks, preview of 10 things I like this week. 1, Vicente Luque is fighting. That's the subhead. 2, Jeff Neal is fighting. Give me all of that fight. Take all of these takeaways. Take a blessed day. Know that you love. Know that we care about you. Know that we appreciate you coming in, spending time with us, checking us out, leaving comments. Shout to Tiffany for leaving us a comment on the YouTube page. There is a YouTube page now. Harry is going to make it look better than I can. I have done a little bit of work here in 2 days of being in the new house, of making the delivery and presentation of this look a little better. It will continue to get there. We will continue to do good things. We will continue to talk about good fights. We continue to appreciate it all. Thank you for watching. We love you. Appreciate you. Take care of yourselves. Be good to one another. We'll talk to you next week.